So this is Pat Wilson, and he's the commissioner of the Georgia Department of Economic Development. And he held a meeting. I think there's like 100 people there with Georgia and Korean officials, and basically talking about how awesome it is to do business in Georgia, and that how Korea and Hyundai were benefiting Georgia by supplying a lot of jobs for people in Georgia, for Americans in Georgia. How Korean investment is raising the lives and livelihood and quality of life in Georgia, these kind of things. And when I was watching through this stuff, the thing that really bothered me, I was just like, from international perspective, do you Americans have no shame, and do you have no honor? Because you arrested the Korean workers that you're bragging about that you're doing business with. Like, think how crazy this stuff is. And there was no apology from the Americans. And so essentially then the Korean diplomat, talked, and he's just like, hey, you arrested our people. If we're ever going to invest in USA and in Georgia, we have to solve this particular issue. And I want to go over this stuff because not only do I want to give you, Korean perspective, what Koreans are saying, and also talk about U.S.-Korea relations, because it relates to how people think about the USA abroad. So, for example, and Pat, he's never going to apologize. that's the Americans. But I wanted you to understand like how are Americans perceived around the world. So this is just from local Koreans. They say, "What kind of change of stance is this without an apology?" And there's a lot of comments from Koreans keep asking like, why are we doing business with these Americans if they're not going to apologize? Another person writes, "As long as Trump is here, you should avoid going to the U.S. and he won't even apologize." And it's interesting because even though the Americans don't talk about this stuff that much, like Koreans is really passionate about what happened to workers at Hyundai. Because I just want you to think about it. I always remind you guys, just imagine that America had a company in another country, be it GM or Ford or whatever, and imagine if 317 Ford workers were locked in prison for a week. Like, how do you think the Americans would respond to that? And I think you already know, right? They would send in the Delta Force and start bombing everything. So like, people would be pissed. And just imagine if the other country didn't apologize, and then the other country started asking you to give them more money and create jobs for them. You're just like, wait, what? You just arrested our people and you're not going to apologize? And so when you read through some of the Korean comments, just for example, this person was saying, this situation arose because of the supremacist, racist union, and the Republican Party in the Georgia House of Representatives has mindlessly defended it. This would make the Hyundai LG union furious. They're blatantly racist, talking about people in Georgia. And even now, the local union in Georgia claims that the Korean workers were at fault. And part of the thing that's kind of interesting, he's talking about how the comments talking about how in Georgia there was a union that I think they were like pipe welding or something like that. And, they were claiming that the Koreans were taking the pipe welding jobs, which is just not true. The Koreans that they were there to do specialized work, right? Install technology, train American workers, etc. And it's just not something the Americans can do. They don't work for LG. They're not trained in said stuff. And they're, talking about two different jobs. We're not talking about pipe welders here. And another person, right, in Korea, they say, don't trust them. The moment they set foot again in USA, they'll be completely different, meaning that, the Americans are just trying to sweet talk to get the Koreans to come back. This is also going on in the Wall Street Journal recently. They put out a story. It says Hyundai gets cold shoulder from Trump despite charm offensive. And actually, the Wall Street Journal went through several of the things that we've been talking about on this channel, basically saying, Hyundai and Korea were sincere in trying to invest in USA, create jobs, and do win-win relationship. And then Trump just has these people arrested. And then this is really interesting. This is the New York Post, which is very much a right-wing publication in the USA. And they're running the headline, Hyundai showered Trump with cash commitments to invest in U.S. only to have feds raid the Georgia factory. So basically, that's why I come up with my first reaction was do the Americans have no shame and no honor? Maybe Trump does. I can't speak for all Americans, but that's just how Trump is. This is also going on whenever they talk about the shutdown here in Korea. This is SBS. They're just basically showing, hey, the government is closed and Trump's the one responsible. And then they show you the signs if you plan on going to USA. Visitor center is closed. And it has a very definite meaning to that. And then when we're showing, say, what's going on with the situation with Chicago or this crazy meeting that Trump had with all of his advisors, let me show you the stuff they show that Trump says.
We have a very serious left-wing terror threat in our country. Radicals associated with the domestic terror group Antifa.
법무부와 국토 안보부
And so what's kind of interesting is when, they describe Antifa in the Korean news, they're just like, well, there's this group, they're against racism, they're against fascists, and Trump attacks that kind of group. So, you can kind of figure it out, like what the kind of person would attack an anti-racist group, a racist person. What kind of person would attack an anti-fascist group, a fascist person, right? You get the gist.
It's anarchy. We can't and we will not let masked terrorists burn our buildings, attack our law enforcement.
텍사스 주
And then they show
방위군의
Bondi,
TV
she looks really
예고대본이
angry. And then what they do also is they keep showing that that Trump keeps calling in the military on his own cities.
He says a lot of things to the camera. He likes to pretend to be a tough guy. Come and get me.
And I want you to see also that they show very clearly that there are two different parties in USA, right? So Pritzker being the governor of Illinois. They also show a lot of the the mayor of Chicago. Listen to this.
The federal government is out of control. This is one of the most dangerous times in our nation's history.
And so this is sort of what they're showing us here in Korean. I just want you to get a sense of it, because then when we go through Korean comments, it'll make sense of why people are saying the stuff that they say that they are. Here's some more.
The governor of Texas should be worrying about Texas. Why he all up in my business? Focus on Texas.
Right, and so they're basically saying, hey, there's local people that are pushing back. Then they go to Hegseth, and just look at the imagery. Just imagine if you're in another country seeing this stuff. How would you read this? And watch.
Physical standards must be high and gender neutral. It's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon.
이어 등장한 트럼프 대통령
Isn't it kind of weird? It's like, why are we talking about fat generals and stuff? And then they show like what Trump is talking about with the enemy within things.
We are under invasion from within. We're stopping it very quickly.
반대 세력을
And what's going on also, what they made it really, really clear, is Trump is only calling the American military against effectively blue cities and cities that have politicians that Trump doesn't like. And so the big concern actually in Korea is USA going to some sort of civil war because Trump is purposely targeting, again, blue cities. And then what I wanted to you guys get a different perspective. Just imagine you're in another country. So let's say, or see people carrying guns around. And this is USA actually, but just imagine like, you're in USA and they show you, whatever leader, it doesn't matter, Italy or France or whatever. And the president's like talking about going after the enemies within, and he's meeting with all the generals, and you're just like, what the heck is this? And so that's how Koreans are reading this stuff, the things that Trump are saying. And let me show you some Korean comments. One person says, whose pattern is exactly the same? Ha ha ha, anti-state forces, ha ha, election fraud. And this is a reference to before President, here in Korea, President Yoon was basically just like Trump, claiming that, the other side's cheating, and if you're, say anything, then you must be anti-government, right? Anti-state forces, that kind of stuff. Also, this person says, the man who incited the storming of the Capitol after losing the presidential election to Biden is now shamelessly talking about the Insurrection Act, right? So people in Korea are directly calling out Trump for being a hypocrite. You guys know it's the whole January 6th stuff. Here's another person in Korea says, the far right is so consistent, talking about right-wing people in various countries. They're idiots, yet they wield guns and swords so readily. Their own lives are precious, but the lives of others are nothing more than dumb numbers. They force people to listen to what they deserve. Rogues equals far right. And for those of you watching this in USA and other places, just know that you are not alone. The majority of people can clearly see who Trump really is. I mean, it's not that hard to see. I mean, and especially say like with Hegseth, he's talking about fat generals. I mean, it's crazy, it's sad, it's laughable, it's stressful all at the same time. And I'm sure you guys know how I feel and how you feel. I guess we should say how we all feel. But that's why I'm sharing with you, because when you're not alone, you realize that, there are more sane people than not. Here's another one. Another local Korean says, it just shows how petty American politics is. Another person writes, In the US, judges block it, but in Korea, the people block it. And I'm just telling you the truth, guys. I live here in Korea. We just had, again, President Yoon, I have to keep mentioning because you may not know recent history. Just a few months ago, the president tried to do what Trump's, up to, trying to declare martial law, accuse the other side of all these conspiracy theory stuff. Yoon would basically hang out with cult people, take bribes, and like listen to these far right YouTuber type people. And it's basically like kind of like your Glenn Becky kind of stuff, except their studios look far more budgety. And just when you actually see this stuff, you're just like, are these people for real? But that's essentially what it is. It's this sort of far right, this kind of stuff. And so the people taken to the street, though, does mean a lot, because essentially you don't necessarily need the courts. The people, it's democracy, took to the streets and, said this is not right. The soldiers stepped down. They said, I'm not following illegal orders. And ultimately, the president in Korea was arrested and impeached. Another person writes, the devil has struck America. Here's another person. If things don't go your way, they accuse you of being anti-state. It's so unsettling. The presidency isn't your place to do whatever you want. Respect it and compromise. Sigh. Again, talking about Trump. Here's another one. As Yoon, and that's again the former president of Korea, as Yoon Suk Yeol said, opposing me is considered anti-state. It's the same nonsense from those who dream of dictatorship. So I'm telling you guys, the Yoon situation here in Korea is the same exactly as Trump. These days, America feels like communism. How could that be a democracy? China seems more democratic. It's ridiculous. Trump is really ruining America. Tisk, tisk. No more comments. It's a real gangster state with only a large area. The return of American imperialism is another comment. A sad future awaits, and our country's far right is now behaving like pro-Japanese collaborators of the late Chosun dynasty. We must never ignore this. And I don't want to go into like Korean history, but I'll just say this. For any country, know your own history, and you want to be on the right side of history. And this is sort of like, say, when we're talking about the stuff with Trump, guys, remember what happened with the January 6th stuff. Don't forget that. Remember all the lies that Trump tells on a daily basis, and be on the right side of these things. If Trump is willing to lie about, say, when he got first elected, be it the crowd size stuff, that was like this first day as president, they're going to lie about all sorts of stuff. And then the last person writes here, if you vote stupidly, that's what happens. So again, this is what's going on in Korea. I always recommend these movies, guys, because it'll make sense when you see them, why I keep recommending them. One is called 12/12 Today. It's sort of how people like a Trump. It's happened in Korea. It's a true story, how they try to seize power with the military. And then this would be it's actually one of my very favorite movies, 1987, when regular people realize that when corruption and a lot of bad things that, say, the government does, like, say, your Trumpy stuff, starts to really affect your life, that you need to take action to the streets, do it peacefully. I'll give you just the story, just the opening scene. The government lies about the death of a protester, basically, and tries to cover it up. And the cover-up doesn't go the way that they think it does. Think they wanted it to. So I'm telling you, it's a great movie, and it's a true story. So I do appreciate your time, everyone. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.